Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for our talk at Lightbox Expo on Inside the Art of Baobab Studios. I have an awesome panel of speakers here. So first, Eric Darnell. Eric, can you wave? Eric Darnell is co-founder of Baobab Studios. He's a director on all the films in the Madagascar franchise and also Ants, DreamWorks' first ever CG animated film. He was also executive producer on Penguins of Madagascar, and he's the co-founder of Baobab Studios and the chief creative officer. Larry Cutler. Hi, Larry. Larry is also our co-founder of Baobab and our CTO. He was at DreamWorks, where he was head of character technologies and director of production workflows, which meant he was responsible for figuring out where all the resources went within DreamWorks. He was also a TD at Pixar early on Toy Story 2 and Monsters, Inc. And he's a judge for the Oscar Technical Achievement Awards, or as he likes to say, the Sci-Tech Committee. You can clarify later, Larry. This is Kane Lee. Kane, can you wave? Kane is our head of content at Baobab, and he has executive produced all of Baobab's projects with multiple Emmys and works with many studios, including Tonko House, and is also part of the PGA. Anika Nagpal is creative development supervisor at Baobab Studios, where she manages the earliest stages of story and art development on a number of animated series and feature projects on their slate. Yi-Jen, hi Yi-Jen, can you wave? Yi-Jen is the art director at Baobab, and after graduating from Art Center, she's been working at motion graphics, games, and the VR industry, and she joined Baobab in 2020. Asong Lee is the director and art director who directed episodes of Storybots at Jib Jab and at Chromosphere for shows like Carmen Sandiego. He also directed the award-winning indie short film My Moon and was an artist on Over the Moon. And he's currently an assistant art director at Disney TVA. And he was also the art director on Namoo, directed by Oscar-nominated Eric O, which we'll talk about later on today because we created that. Okay, if you guys have any questions at all, please type it into the chat and we'll answer them live. So who is Baobab? Baobab is the 8-time Emmy Award-winning and leading independent interactive animation studio. Our mission is to bring out your sense of wonder, inspire you to dream, make you matter. You might be wondering why I'm talking. I'm Maureen Fan. I'm CEO co-founder of Baobab. Baobab has released 7 animations, or it might be 8 now, to commercial and critical acclaim. We've won 8 Emmys, including 3 Best Interactive Emmys and also 2 Annie Awards. Baobab's IP is being adapted into books by Macmillan Penguin Random House, into film by Disney Fox, and also original series with the premium streamers and also into games. Penguin Random House has partnered to turn Baobab's The Magic Paintbrush into a multi-book series, and Macmillan has partnered with us to turn Intercats into a multi-book graphic novel series. Our work stars Oprah, John Legend, Ali Wong, Kate Winslet, Daisy Ridley, Glenn Close, Lupita Nyong'o, Jennifer Hudson, Diego Luna, and more. We're talking about the art today, and if you guys are interested in any of them, and we're going to be showing a slideshow so you can see some of the art, you can also purchase our art of books. One of them is called The Art of Baobab, The Beginning, and another one, The Art of Baba Yaga, is coming out too. The hardcover of The Art of Baobab can be purchased on our website at www.baobabstudios.com or as an ebook on Amazon. And The Art of Baba Yaga ebook is also available on Amazon right now, and the hardcover is releasing later this fall. And if you check your Lightbox Expo goodie bags, you'll find an exclusive zine of The Art of Namoo, starring work by Asong and also Eric O. Okay, so let's get into the panel. Eric Darnell, can you tell us how Baobab was formed and why did you decide to start Baobab?
Well, I had been at DreamWorks for pretty much 2 decades and finally decided it was time to move on, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do. But then through a mutual friend, I met Maureen. I'll speak about you in the third person now. I met Maureen, and she was at Zynga at the time, vice president of their content, and she had always dreamed of starting an animation studio. And I hadn't really thought much about that. In my experience, it was always these massive juggernauts, like DreamWorks, where I worked. but she said, now's the time because VR is brand new. It's technological disruption. This is how we can rise above the others. And all of that was interesting to me. But what was really interesting to me was when she put a headset on my head and I saw the state of the art of VR as it was 6-7 years ago, and realized that this is becoming finally something that was super cool. And between just my inspiration and enthusiasm and Maureen's talent at making things happen, and then Larry obviously coming on board too with his incredible talent, we really felt like we had the three legs of the milk stool that we needed to have a creative company, with Maureen's business expertise, Larry's technological expertise, and whatever expertise I have in the creative side of things. So it was, kind of a Hail Mary pass or a flying leap off a cliff or whatever, but it's all worked out and it's been super fun. So I don't know. I wouldn't change a thing, I guess.
Thank you, Eric. Since this is a panel about the art of Baobab, I was wondering if you could tell us more about your ethos on art direction. Like, do you have a house style? How do you approach art for each project?
Well, I approach art for each project the way I try to approach just directing in general, which is not something I knew or had in my head when I started directing, but something I learned over the years is that, like, ideally, you're going to try to do your best to surround yourself with people who are better at you, better than you at what they do than you are, right? That's the whole idea, right? So all I need to do as a director is just get the hell out of their way and let them do the amazing work that they do. That doesn't mean I don't have any job. I say, like, okay, at the end of the day, we all need to be on that hill over there. And then everybody is responsible for figuring out how to get there. So I kind of tell them the why, but I try not to tell people the how, because hopefully they have a better idea about how to do it than I do. So that means we don't have a house style. That means that as an artist, you come in and you're expected to be inspired. You're expected to inspire us, and you're expected to bring your passion and your vision and your experience and your creativity to the work that we do. And that's how we're able to make each project, something that's unique, something that stands out, something that's pushing the limits of what we can do in whatever medium we're working with. And it's the way that I think we try to work with all of our talent, including the creative technicians and engineers that work on stuff, and everything in between them and the people that are doing the very first original conception for the project.
That brings us to Yijin, Baobab's amazing art director. Yijin, can you tell us what you do at Baobab? How is the process of art directing similar or different from other places that you've worked?
Sure. So at Baobab, I work on different development projects closely with the development team. And in here, we every day we try to brainstorm and gathering reference for each project, and we talk about the look, the concept, the characters, and of course we will eventually get into sketches and try to paint it out and make it appealing look. Yeah, but this is just the everyday thing we do at Baobab in the art team. And the same thing, the thing that we do similar in Baobab compared to other studios is that it's still very similar to all the art process. We always start from gathering reference. We start from brainstorming about ideas and try to bring up as many options as possible when we review with team members. The difference is, at least for me, because at the Baobab, I get to work a lot closer with the writers, so I will get to I will expose a lot more on the story part, the concept part, and the ideas. So, which is really fun for me. Yeah.
Awesome. And can you tell us what a typical day is like at Baobab and doing art directing for you?
Yeah. So after I get up, I have my coffee, and then I usually at 10 we start to do some reviews, either with the artist or with the team, like with Eric, Anika, Larry, and Ken, and we'll just after this review, I always try to have like a chunk of time when I can like really focus on sketches and like the painting work. And after that, usually we'll have other meetings, like either more about like reviewing with artists and brainstorm, all that stuff. Yeah, it's quite a typical day at Baobab for me.
I think it's really interesting that like lots of ADs, I think, have to focus on just one project and go really deep and keep on working on that versus you kind of go across all of our projects, including marketing and all the different, and they all have different art styles. So is that stressful or is that fun? Like, how do you balance between going deep and also, across?
Yeah, I think it's super fun for me to do different things. I won't say I get bored by doing one thing, but I personally prefer doing different ones. So it can sometimes it's a bit hard to put my mind in different projects, but after a certain time, I learned to like derail myself really quickly in between projects. So, and I get to see like different artists with all these different styles, and like I was mind blowing all the time by all kinds of cool arts. So it's definitely a fun thing for me.
Cool, thank you, Yijen. Eric and Larry, I would love to hear about the process early on, like when we first started company and we were like squatting at other people's offices because we didn't have offices. How did you art direct? Like, how did we come up with art direction? And also, besides the fact that we're a startup, we had no people or desks or computers. How did you take into account all the technological constraints we had since we're working in a real-time game engine?
Larry, why don't you talk about that to give some good context for technically what we were up against?
Yeah, so, I think both Eric and myself kind of came from the feature film side of things. And so I don't think we realized it, but we had this amazing luxury where we could send off a render overnight and each frame could take a couple of hours. I worked on shots that, where you might have 12, 24 hours, like, you get one shot a day at it because what was going on was so complex and so, so rich. And in VR, basically everything is updating at 90 frames a second and you're updating both eyes. And so because the characters can be responding to you, because the world is changing depending on where I look, everything needs to be running at 90 frames a second and re-rendered. And so suddenly we went from, instead of each frame taking a couple of hours, each frame has 11 milliseconds to render and renders twice, once for each eye. So that was like a big splash of really ice cold water in our face when we started the company. I mean, we knew what we were getting into, but basically anything that we were doing from an art direction standpoint had to be something that could actually be rendered in the game engine. And, again, as Eric alluded to, the first thing you do is you find really brilliant artists and engineers who are able to work together. And that, I would say, was the number one thing that we did when we started the company. We brought in some really amazing engineers who were super passionate about taking kind of the visual language and the way we work on characters and environments, but to actually tackle that in real time. And we also brought together, an amazing production designer and artists who wanted to take on that challenge as well. And the key was that, it was all about collaboration. It was all about give and take. So you would have, Cody Gramstead was our original production designer, and he would, sort of paint his vision for Invasion. And then we'd have engineers who would take that and, spend an evening or two writing some code and trying to kind of prototype what that might look at look like, and and then highlight all the ways that couldn't work. And then it was just kind of this iterative loop to be able to get something that really reflected both Eric's vision for our early projects and Cody's kind of execution of that. Eric, you probably have things to add to that from a creative side.
No, I mean, I think that's a huge part of it, is being able to collaborate, especially in those early days, because, there was no textbook. And there's probably still not a real good textbook for VR because it's changing so quickly and there's so much to discover. And we didn't know any of the rules. So, just trying to get everything onto the screen was a huge challenge. But we weren't just trying to get images onto the screen either. We kind of challenged ourselves to try to do everything we could to really understand and realize and visualize what VR superpower is, which is really immersing the viewer inside these worlds, which also means inside the stories. So we had to have characters that could run in real time, that could look you in the eye and respond and react to you being in their world. And they also had to be animatable in a way that provided you with all of this nuance and all of this subtlety and all of this inner thought. And so that became another monumental challenge for, we couldn't do things the way we did them at DreamWorks, or they do them at any big studio. We had to come up with and write some of our own tools, some proprietary software to allow us to get that kind of complex deformations and subtle performances that will actually check that box of making the viewer believe that character standing in front of them is real and that they'll care about them and they'll care about the world and suspend their disbelief. And that's a challenge on every VR piece, but in the beginning, it was through the roof because we just didn't know what we were doing. And the pipe that data was going through was so incredibly tiny. So hats off to Larry and everybody who made that happen. It's just amazing. And the artists.
Yijin, you art directed a lot of stuff in VR, and I was wondering if you could tell us more about what are things that you have to think about in VR that you wouldn't normally have to think about. And I know Eric just said some things, but maybe you could, anything Eric missed on the art direction side that you want to add.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest thing is for artists, especially I personally like to do a lot of textures, a lot of smudging and painting stuff, but in VR, because of the technical restrictions, sometimes we have to keep things more intact, not so much crazy, crazy edges, crazy textures. So, but it's really cool to have those limits, but try to find a really nice balance between the look and the technical limits. And yeah, it's always fun to think about those things.
Cool.
Yeah.
I know also Cody, for Asteroids, for example, I remember him saying because the audience can walk anywhere and can see anything, you have to design a lot more because it's not far away and fuzzy detail. If someone walks up to that thing, it better be well defined. One thing he did in Asteroids, we have these two characters, Mac and Cheese. And if you peer into one of the little window holes, you can actually see Mac and Cheese's room. And he actually designed it. For me as a business person, I'm that's a waste of money. But from the creative side, if somebody actually walks up and actually looks in, maybe they can learn more about oh, why is Mac's room look like that versus Cheese's room looks like that? You learn more about their personality and in a way, their backstory. So I thought that was really interesting too. And also, of course, art direction, using art to lighting to direct your eye is so important, I would say also in VR. Larry, Crow the Legend won so many Emmys. Won Emmys for Best Director for Eric, Best Interactive Program, but more awesome, it won for individual achievement in production design and character design. Yet it was designed to be performant in a real-time game engine. Can you tell me more about, actually this is both Eric and Larry. So Eric, how did we come up with the look? And then Larry, how did we actually make that look happen?
we started with something that we knew we wanted to be very illustrative. We weren't interested at all in duplicating reality. We wanted to create an alternate universe. And so the way to start that was with art. And so Cody Gramstad, our production designer, began working on these worlds that were very much of an illustration with the kinds of things that Eugene was just talking about are just really difficult to do in VR, to give something soft edges, to give glows and things to some of the lighting that feels right and fits in a 3D landscape. And specifically that style, it's sort of like if you're painting a picture and you're using a certain brush and you're using the things in the distance, you're painting things in the distance and the foreground with the same brush. That's kind of what we were trying to figure out how we could do. So we still have the depth, but there's something about sort of the frequency of everything that sort of feels like it has this sort of almost painterly or illustrative sort of approach behind it. So now I'll stop and turn it over to you, Larry.
Yeah, I mean, when we started Crow, the art direction was one piece of this really big puzzle, which is we just knew, like, we'd been working on Invasion and Asteroids, which were kind of in the same world, and we knew that Crow was just this much bigger project, and it was much more expansive. It had a lot of different hero characters. It really had a depth to it, and a heart to it that was going to push just the scale of everything we did. But at the core of it, like the first thing that Eric kind of laid out as he was thinking about starting out on Crow was the art direction. It was, hey, I want something that looks completely different from what we've done on Invasion and Asteroids. And as Eric said, something that really is kind of this illustrative storybook that you could kind of like jump into. And I don't want any soft edges. And Cody quickly translated.
You mean hard edges, right?
Yeah, no soft edges, all hard edges. I meant the reverse of that. Yeah, only soft edges, no hard edges. And so,
except on the rocks.
Right. And so,
sorry, I'll stop interrupting.
Yeah. I'm just gonna like say random things and see if Eric notices. And so, first of all, like when in VR, like so, if you were to say, I want everything to be really soft and no hard edges in a traditional, animated film, you would just throw lots of fur at that. Like there are ways to actually solve that problem. And you just can't, at least, with the constraints of where we were in VR a few years ago, you just can't do that because it would be just too computationally expensive. And it also wasn't really the look we were going for. And so, Cody very quickly kind of gravitated toward this very stippled, like dithered textural pattern. And that started permeating all of his early concept artwork. And again, that's where, our chief scientist, Michael Hutchinson, sort of took those images and tried to figure out a way to actually recreate that dithered pattern. And really what's hard about it is that transparency is just really difficult in VR because it's super expensive. And so there's all these hacks of doing cheap transparency, which just all fail if you really want that soft edge, especially on characters, which are highly deforming. And so, there was just this R&D effort going on the engineering side to actually get this really soft, dithered feel through the whole piece. And, iterating with Cody trying to find a look. And, we ended up with something that I think really kind of achieved Eric's vision, but was actually able to be running, in our real-time game engine. And that was really like the start of all the things that we did on Crow. The other piece of it, as Eric mentioned and the early phases of our company is we knew that having characters that, were as, believable and had as much depth and animation as you would get in a feature film, being able to do that in VR was something that we're really striving for. And Crow pushed that to the limits because, we weren't just doing wacky, aliens. we were really having characters that you had to see the thought behind, what they were feeling and the heart that was in them. And so by this point, we had really kind of pushed on all his character technology to really make that possible. And, so, Crow just kind of pushed our studio and our pipeline to the next level to be able to support, Eric's vision for the project.
Thank you, Larry. Kane and Eric. Actually, no, I'm going to ask Kane a question for you first. Crow was inspired by the Native American origin story of how the crow became the crow. How did you make sure everything about the project, including the art, was authentic to Native American culture?
Well, the first thing we did was involve the Native American community. We were very fortunate. A very good close friend of mine, her grandfather is Randy Edmonds, who's an 86-year-old Kiowa Caddo tribal elder in San Diego, and he's a fixture in Southern California. He's a well-known local legend and the master of ceremonies for a lot of Native American ceremonies and powwows across different tribes. So there's, I think, over 570 tribes recognized by the United States, and they're all very different. And creating bridges across tribes can be challenging at times. But he's known as someone who's able to bridge the divides and bring different indigenous communities together. So we asked him to be our narrator and to be our advisor, and he brought us a perspective that spans his entire life. He grew up in Oklahoma, was relocated during the Indian Relocation Acts of the 1950s. He went to boarding school where legends and stories like the origin story of the crow were actually banned from being told to indigenous youth. So he actually was brought to a boarding school where he couldn't tell stories like the one we were trying to tell. So he was a fierce advocate for us using our animation to create a bigger spotlight and platform for these stories, these beautiful stories that should be known throughout the universe, but are very little known because they've been censored and banned through our nation's dark history. So he was definitely an inspiration in terms of us being able to bridge different Native American communities and talk to them about art and storytelling and things that inspired our artists and animators. We also partnered with Native Americans in Philanthropy, one of the largest philanthropic organizations in the United States, and its CEO, Sarah Eaglehart, who was also one of our producers. She and Randy both won, as consulting producers, they won Emmy Awards when we won the Best Interactive Trophy for Crow the Legend. And what Sarah brought actually was creatively really, really important for the authenticity of our storytelling. She introduced to us the idea of indigenous worldview. So, and there have been white papers on this, and she's at the forefront of this education, which is the idea that Western storytelling is very linear. And throughout the centuries, Native American storytelling is actually more nonlinear. It's actually more similar to virtual reality in a way. So when she first put on a headset and tried our early versions of Crow and gave us notes, she was pretty wowed because she said that the oral storytelling tradition that had been passed down over the centuries didn't translate as directly into film or TV, but it really translated well into VR because you felt like you were there. You were, she described the feeling of dancing with her cousins, the two-legged and the four-legged and the winged creatures, being able to actually feel you're present among the stars and next to the sun and the moon in ways that are very experiential and more true to the Native American roots in the storytelling. And so we were very gratified to get that producing input from our Native American partners. So it was a learning process for us, to be honest, and something that we tremendously grew from. And I think the project speaks for itself in the end in terms of something that we're really proud of that felt very authentic to us and our Native American partners.
So moving on to Baba Yaga, this question is for Kane or Eric. First of all, congratulations on the Emmy wins for Best Directing Team. So that's for you, Eric, and also Individual Achievement in Character Design, which is for Cal at Dansov. also for the 3 Concept Art Award nominations, which is here at Lightbox Expo. Can you guys tell me more about how stagecraft influenced the production design, and also how transporting the traditional story of Baba Yaga from Eastern European setting, which is where most tales about Baba Yaga come from, how transporting it to a tropical setting guided and changed your production design?
Well, maybe I could speak a little bit about the theatricality of Baba Yaga. The idea really with all our work is to create these magical worlds that exist, following their own rules. And so again, we're not creating photoreality with Baba Yaga. What we really wanted to create was a tone and a feeling, something that maybe resonates with the first time that we all were introduced to fairy tales, whether it's, through a story or a picture or a storybook. And then even going from there into other forms of illustration, theatrical performances of certain things, which aren't trying to be real, but kind of present their own version of reality to really dig deep into a theme or an idea or a character. And so we really felt that this sort of theatrical element could be really important to us with Baba Yaga as we were drawing upon things like storybooks and the kinds of even just images that you might have in your head while you're being told a story, or the kind of dreams you might have at night after you've heard the story. And so we could still create a world that was very real, feeling, that was emotional, that connected you not just with your place in it, but also with the characters in it. But at the same time, we didn't have to follow the rules of being in the real world. So we could have a key light come on over here and then turn off and another one come on over here. And we could use those things to direct your eye, but we could also use things like that to direct the viewer emotionally through the story and to help them understand what's important to them at any given moment based upon their actions. They may turn someplace and something may happen that wouldn't happen if they hadn't have turned there. And so we can design things that feel magical, that feel real because you have all of that information about volume and space all around you, but are also from another world, from another, mind of the artist, I suppose. So that part of it is and has always been really interesting to me in designing worlds for CG in general and for VR in particular. I don't know, do you want to add anything, Kane, about that or how we sort of picked location?
Yeah, I mean, I think the, more important than, transporting it into a more tropical location was the feeling of like you're opening up a pop-up, like a pop-up fairy tale book, and you're like stepping inside of the fairy tale in a universe that feels very handcrafted and very pushed, and sort of the opposite of the direction that a lot of CG animation has been going the last couple of decades, which is more towards photorealism and more towards this sort of very stylized, sort of retro art feel. So you could feel like you can feel like the handcrafted environment. You could feel everything felt very hand painted and illustrative, and that we weren't trying to go for that typical CG animation look that sort of populates our theaters. So to me, that was the joy of walking inside of a fairy tale where, like you said, Eric, the lighting, it doesn't have to follow real life, like it could have that sort of theatrical quality to it, because you're in sort of this magical magical universe where the rules of our normal universe don't apply. And I think that the stagecraft of it is something I'm really proud of that our artists achieved as well too, because it really did feel, a lot of people throughout the industry were like, oh, this is what it feels like in VR to actually, like how I felt when I was a kid at Disney, at a Disney theme park going on a ride for the first time, and you don't know what to expect, but you always know where to stand and where to look, and and everything still feels like very fresh and like a surprise. So I think there were just so many details art-wise in it that really just made the sum greater than its parts. And I'm really excited too that our team did try to do something different. We're taking an Eastern European fairy tale, creating a whole different mythology where there's this mysterious island in the Arctic Ocean, where for some reason it's very warm, and you have more of a tropical flora and life growing there, and it's mysterious in that way. And then you discover it's because of this witch in the woods. So I definitely thought our team did an amazing job of trying to take an age-old fairy tale and sort of flip it on its head.
Yeah, and hats off to Matt Sajek. I'm going to mispronounce his name, Matt Sajeski. He was just Matt to me, but who came up with the original sort of visualization for what this world could be, and really inspired us to feel confident about going down this direction. It's really all kind of came out of his head in this outpouring of all this amazing concept art, and then from there, Glenn Hernandez came and joined the project, and the two became this like well-oiled machine, this team working together, and just created some just amazing imagery. Glenn is like, for me, he's one of the most remarkable colorists that I've ever worked with in my career. I mean, every image that he does is like, what do you call, what do you call that color? I've never seen that color before, and I've never seen that color next to this color before, and yet it somehow just has this sort of integrated beauty and just is amazing. So both for design and color and just world building, these guys were just an amazing team on the show.
So amazing that they're nominated for Annie Award for Best Production Design. So congratulations, Matt and Glenn. Okay, now I want to move on to Namoo, which is our most recent project. So Eric, Baobab just completed Namoo. We premiered it at Tribeca, which means tree. Namoo means tree in Korean. And it was directed by Oscar-nominated director Eric Oh. Can you tell us why Baobab wanted to make Namoo?
Well, really, I think it's as simple as meeting Eric and he coming in and pitching his idea. And, his pitch was emotional and came from his soul and his heart. You just could tell. And he already had done inspirational artwork that reflected the tone and the quality of everything that he was pitching. And so it was just obvious that Eric had a real story to tell. And we were just honored to be able to help him tell it.
Kane, can you tell us more about the origin story? Because you were very close with Eric Go, the origin story of why he wanted to make Namoo.
Yeah, I mean, his grandfather in Korea passed away over a decade ago, and that's when he had his first seed of this idea, which would literally grow into a tree. But he tucked it away for a decade, and as happens to all of us, none of us are immune to this. More people in his life passed away. But then I think his niece was born, and then suddenly I think that created a little bit of a change in terms of how he thought about our mortality and death and life, and sort of the cycle of life. And so he envisioned sort of the journey of our lives as the journey of a tree growing from a seed to a sapling to a full-on tree, and one that is both literal and metaphoric. So in our experience, a tree, we follow the life of a young artist, who falls in love with painting very early on in his life. And as his life unfolds, the most meaningful objects in the different periods of his life, instead of growing leaves, the tree holds these different items and these memories, which are symbolic to all the items that were, for whatever reason, good or bad. We don't pass. There's no judgment passed on any of them. Are the things that meant the most to him throughout his life. I think that it was a very inspirational project for us to do. Like Eric told me about this project 2 summers ago. We were both in Korea for different reasons, and we just had coffee, and he's like, hey, I have this project I've been thinking about, and I've been thinking about Baobab, and wondering if you guys might be interested in this, and I was sold the minute he told it to me, and then he came into our studio a month later, and I think everyone, there were even tears in the room when he shared it, and it was something that we became very passionate about. So,
David cry, and David never cries.
Hi, David. And so, he, so Eric came in, he's someone who's been a friend to our studio for a long time. He's been kind of like a pioneer in his own right in animation. He's always been directing his own shorts and experimenting with different animation styles and art styles and creating his own unique brand and aesthetic. So we've been following him for years, and I've worked with him in the past. He really connected with what Baobab was trying to do in terms of trying to push the boundaries of what animated storytelling is and can be. This thing that had been tucked away in his heart for 10 years suddenly felt like it was the right time to tell it. I think partnering with, an animation studio that's trying to do something different, trying to embrace the Koreanness of his story was also something that we're very proud of, and very supported by a studio that's led by one of the few minority female CEOs on the intersection of Hollywood and Silicon Valley. It was sort of the perfect match. So we created this over the entire course of the pandemic with a team spanning 3 different continents. Anika led the production, and we're very proud of it. And it wasn't lost upon us that we created this story about, taking these moments in your life to reflect and to view your own mortality during this time in humanity when the entire world was looking at its own mortality in a new way for the first time. So it was very special, it was very meaningful, it was very impactful, and it was something that we're really proud that we were able to achieve during these crazy times.
Anika, since you production managed this, can you tell us about the crack team that you guys all put together and how they're so badass?
Yeah, it was a crack team. I think Namoo was a really ambitious project from multiple perspectives, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I think to be able to do it, we really needed to work with the very best artists out there, and that really took us all over the world, like Kane was saying. So Namoo was directed by Eric Oh, who is based in Korea. The short was art directed by Asong Lee, who is based in LA. Our 3 Quill leads and animators were based in Canada and Germany and Connecticut. And then Baobab, who led production, was based in the Bay Area. And so it was a really talented team we were able to put together. It was also a very tiny team. It was this core team of 6. For example, there was just one character animator who animated the character in the entire film, which I think is really incredible. And so I think just the fact that it was such a small team, I think makes the work that they did even more amazing.
And can you tell us more? Actually, I can ask Asong. So Asong, how did you come up with the look, and what was the process for coming up with a look, and how did that support the story and vision that Erica was trying to tell?
I think in the beginning, we wanted to figure out the tone more than anything, because the animatic was pretty well thought out, already figured out at that point. And even though we had changes over the course, we picked out like a couple important scenes that could be a turning point or important plot points, and picking out what is the color and how it's going to translate throughout the whole film. So we started doing color thumbnails. I remember that the first shot that we did was scene like 7-8 when the boy meets girl. Yeah, I think something about it, to me, it was like even though the whole short was about the guy, the first time that you see another character and seeing changes in him was pretty strong. So yeah, we had this like very watercolory tone, like using a lot of white, and how color is gonna look based on top of like really bright backdrop. I think that's kind of like the initial direction we started off.
Anika, you had mentioned quill earlier. Can you tell us more about what quill is and what was the process of using quill, and how that is, maybe so that people could really understand what it means to do in quill? How is it different from the way you normally animate in traditional CG animation?
Yeah, of course. And Larry, feel free to jump in here as well. But Quill is a real-time virtual reality animation tool. It's a newer tool that was developed by Oculus. And what we were trying to do, so Namoo using Quill, I think was really complex. It was the most complex thing to have ever been attempted in Quill, both from like an animation quality perspective and like a visual density of information perspective. And it was also anyone's first time ever using Quill to create a 2D theatrical short. And so I can tell you a little bit about, what that process looked like to do all of that. So we had our short film, which is like only 12 minutes, somehow had 18 different sets in the film. And, that was really important from an art direction standpoint because Namoo follows, this man's journey through his life, and each set was a different mood and a different season, different lighting design. And so every single thing in each of those sets, each of those 18 sets was hand painted in virtual reality in a 3D space. In Quill, you basically have a round brush and a flat brush in a couple of different sizes. And so every single thing in all of those 18 sets was painted and built using that very limited set of brushes. And I think what's really amazing is that, each set, like I said, each of those 18 sets had an entirely different lighting design. And there really actually aren't any lighting tools in Quill. And so each set, the Quill artists had to repaint every single object in the set, because essentially what they were doing is painting in the lighting design set by set. And so once you have all of those sets, then you move into animation. And the animation process in Quill is sort of a mix of like claymation and stop motion and traditional 2D animation. And so what our artists were doing is you're moving geometry frame by frame. There's no interpolation. And so every single thing was animated sort of in this very sort of tedious and I think like really handcrafted way. And so everything from, the objects, the characters, to give you, I really mean everything, like even the shadows, for example, were painted in this way. So a really incredible animation process, and our artists were just amazing to be able to do it.
Awesome. So then why did you decide to use Quill as a tool to help achieve Eric Oh's vision?
Well, I think the story was really personal to Eric, and what he loved about Quill was that you really get this handcrafted feel because the artists are in there, they're in virtual reality, and sort of like claymation, they're creating all the geometry with their hands, they're moving all the geometry with their hands, and I think every single set is painted, like I said, and so all of that, both like the way that you paint in Quill and you animate in Quill, gives the entire thing a really beautiful handcrafted feel. And I think that was something that Eric was looking for. Just the tone of the piece is so personal that I think that's something he was really excited about.
Cool. And Kane, where can people see Namoo, our 2D film?
Where it's currently playing in the different festivals. So we just had a big premiere this summer at Tribeca Film Festival. And we just had our Korean premiere at Bifon in South Korea, which is actually where Eric and I originally talked about it 2 years ago. And what's upcoming? We have a few festivals that we'll announce soon on our website and social media.
Okay, Eric and Yijen, what are you looking for in a prospective Baobab Studios artist? Are you only looking for full-time? Are you looking for contract? Like what do you look for?
Well, I mean, aside from full-time or contract, which we could talk about, I mean, I think really what we're looking for are people who love being an artist, who who are multi-talented, who are eager to always grow. You know, there's this one quote that I came across the other day that says something like, in this moment, we are the best artists that we've ever been, and at the same time, the worst artists that we will ever be. Which means that as long as we're working on our art, we will always get better, and there's always room to get better. You're never going to make the perfect thing, but you can live the perfect life of an artist by always looking for ways to improve your work and yourself. And so that's what we look for in artists, people who are multi-talented, who are comfortable wearing many hats, who are flexible, who go into the world with their eyes wide open, they're easily inspired, they're interested in the world and the people around them, and ultimately they're a good collaborator with us and a nice person, you know? So those are things that, like, I think if people took a deep breath and thought about them every day, you know, we could all kind of practice a life like that. But the best artists seem to be the ones that do that. That's what we're looking for. Ultimately recognizing that the work that we do is always going to be greater than the sum of the parts, but together we can do something that will be greater than any one of us.
Yeah, I think Eric mentioned all the qualities we are looking for artists. And yeah, so just basically someone who's versatile and self-driven and all these great quality, and someone who can take critiques well, because we do a lot of reviews. If there's someone like that out there, we're like grab onto them, like, join us.
Yeah, and we do actually work with a lot of artists on contract basis and part-time and project-based work too. Sometimes we're always searching for artists, because we never know when we might find someone that has a particular style or a unique vision, and we realize this is somebody that can really take this idea that we have and take it over the top, you know, and take it to wherever it needs to go. And so it does mean that, you know, we like artists that have like ideas that they can bring to the table, and they're not just doing a cookie cutter thing, that they're bringing part of themselves to what they do, because that's where you're going to do your best work.
Eric, when there are lots of big, like you come from DreamWorks, where it's a larger studio, is there anything different that you look for Baobab, different from the type of artists or talent that you would look for back when you were at a big studio?
Well, you know, at a big studio, you have this wonderful luxury of like, oh, you've got a guy and all they ever do is character designs, and they're great at it. And there's another guy who's like an incredible modeler, you know, or a set designer, or you know, a great with light or color. And we're looking for people that are ready, and even if they don't have the experience, that they have the open mind to sort of be ready to explore all of those things, you know, because we don't have our teams, you know, of 100 people on a movie. You know, we have our core team. I mean, Baobab itself is a really, really small company. And we get things done not through quantity, but with quality and you know, and passion. And so collaboration and people who are motivated and inspired and ready to try anything is kind of where we're looking and where we need to be looking. So we just want I think I was about to say we want the best, but you know what we want? We want the people who are going to be the best artists, and you know, in the future, because you know, we're all like growing, and we're all learning, and we're all, like I said, going into this brand new medium and the other things that we're doing with our eyes wide open. So we don't need experts. We need people with passion, and we need people with inspiration and talent.
Okay, now this is a fun question. Of all the artwork and all the art pieces, drawings, paintings, whatever, that all the artists at Baobab have done, what is your favorite piece of Baobab artwork? So I'm going to go around and ask each of you. Anika.
Cody Gramstad did this early painting on Baba Yaga, which I just love. we'll find a way to show it as well. But it was one of the very like earliest concept paintings that were done. A lot changed, but he captured, I think it was like the first time I think we saw like what would become kind of the tone of Baba Yaga, and it was really incredible.
That was one of the ones that's nominated for a concept art for Lightbox. Larry, you can't unfortunately say any of Yijin's new work because that's all confidential.
Well, yeah, I will. Well, then I got to change my answer. Sorry, Jen. So I still, some of my favorite images are some of the very early concept artwork from Crow. Again, I believe Cody did the ones that I'm thinking of, but there's just this one that, you know, is the kind of the first one that we showed that had like the multicolored crow in the corner, and it started to have a little bit of the dithering pattern, and it again kind of set the tone for where we were going. And it was actually done, I believe, before we even really got going on Crow. It was done much earlier when we were just kind of like early on in our company and exploring a bunch of different, you know, projects that we may work on in the future. And on the same tone, I forget who did this, but there's still one image from the space sequence that was just super early on, but kind of captured, I think, the heart of, you know, when Crow goes on this journey past the moon and the, you know, sun to find the one who creates everything by thinking. And even though Crow looks totally different than what he ended up like, I think it also is just very inspirational for what that whole sequence could be.
Maybe that was by Christina Yang, who's an amazing artist who we absolutely love and work with.
It's quite possible.
She did the amazing color, the color boards for Crow.
Yeah.
Yijin, what's your favorite? And you can't choose one of your confidential.
Well, it's really hard to pick one because I love a lot of them. Let's see. I really love a lot of art especially in Crow. I really like the ones, I think it's done by Elena and Olivia Ceballos. I hope I pronounced that right. Yeah, I really love their work and like their lighting, their texture. I think it's a forest piece for Crow. Yeah, I also really love all the more like a special place. Oh, how would you call that space? Like in the heaven or in kind of a
I don't know what's that called.
Like the heavens kind of.
Heavens kind of place, because it's something it's hard to imagine, but it's really visualized so well, and it's like so magical, and also a place that I really want to go and explore myself. Yeah, so I really love those concept art as well.
Christina made those. Yeah, those are beautiful. And by the way, the Ceballos twins are actually doing a talk at Lightbox Expo. So just a quick plug, you guys should all go see it. Eric, how about you?
Well, you know, I would also point to some of Christina's stuff she did, like the palace and stuff in Crow, but also, you know, Cody Gramstad, amazing work, even on our very first piece, Invasion, you know, was just phenomenal and just so rich and vibrant. And I even remember Willie Real's like early character design, some of the very first art we ever had done for Baobab, of the little bunny, just, you know, super cute. I'm sure a lot of you guys know Willie's work, just amazing. And then, you know, just the incredible accomplishments of Cal, and I'll butcher his last name too, Athanasos. Athanasos. But anyway, Cal, he's Cal to me, and Matt is always Matt to me too. But, you know, just remarkable work, just both the quality and the breadth of the work that Cal did for us over the years. It's just amazing. But I have to say, and this is not a cop-out, it's true, that my favorite piece of art is always the one that we're working on. because that's where all the possibilities are, and, the other overused quote, art is never finished. It's just abandoned. It's like you have to walk away from stuff all the time. And you take that and you learn from it and then you move ahead. And so the most exciting thing, whether it's a story or artwork or character design or anything, is always, at least for me, what I'm working on right now.
Kane, I'm not going to ask you what your favorite artwork is because we're out of time, but you get our last question, which is what's next for Baobab Studios?
I think it's been a very organic evolution for our studio. We broke out into the industry working with these immersive technologies like VR and AR, and they've really, and real-time game engine tools. So they've really just become part of our overall toolkit as like the animation studio for the 21st century. And right now is the golden era of animation. I feel right now in not just Hollywood, but the global industry. So we're on the forefront of that. We are so busy doing all sorts of animations, not just the immersive work that we're best known for, but we're actually, we have 3 very high profile projects at major streamers. We're working on movies, TV series. We're working on comic books. We're really sort of an IP creator that is passionate about animation and pushing that industry. So we're busy on all fronts doing what any animation studio does while still being a pioneer with all the latest tools and mediums that can help push what we all think of as animation.
Thank you, Kane. And so that's the end of our talk, but if you guys have questions, hopefully you've been typing it into the chat the entire time. Thank you to everybody at Lightbox. Please check out our booth in Artists Alley where you can see more Namoo stuff. Also check out the zine that we have in your goodie bag. We also have activities for Lightbox. I'm not sure exactly where you go to find those, but we have those. So we hope to talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.